The Eclipse drifted quietly through the vast emptiness of space, its engines humming softly as it carried Daniel and Lily further from the mysterious station. Inside the ship, tension lingered like a shadow, clinging to every corner of the cramped cabin. While they had escaped the Syndicate once again, neither of them felt truly safe. The events at the station weighed heavily on their minds, raising more questions than answers. Lily sat in the common area, her arms wrapped around herself as she stared blankly at the wall. The glowing symbols beneath her skin had dimmed since their escape, but they still pulsed faintly, a constant reminder of the power coursing through her veins. She couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed within her, something irreversible. Whatever the crystal had done, it wasn't just a gift. It was also a burden. Daniel moved about the ship, checking systems and running diagnostics, though his thoughts were far from routine maintenance. He kept glancing at Lily, concern etched into his features. "You okay?" he finally asked, breaking the silence. She looked up, startled by the sound of his voice. "I don't know," she admitted after a moment. "Everything feels different. It's like I'm carrying something too big for me to understand." He nodded slowly, sitting down across from her. "Do you remember anything else about what happened back there? Anything that might help us figure out why the Syndicate is so obsessed with you?" Lily closed her eyes, trying to piece together the fragmented images flooding her mind. "There was a warning," she said hesitantly. "In words exactly, but in feelings. Those people, the ones who built the station, they created the symbols to control their power. But when they lost control, it destroyed them. Whatever's inside me, it's part of that. And if I can't learn how to use it properly," her voice trailed off, fear creeping into her tone. "We'll figure it out," Daniel assured her, though even he wasn't sure how. "We've made it this far, right? We'll keep going until we find some answers." Though his words were meant to comfort her, they only underscored the uncertainty ahead. For now, survival was their priority. But surviving meant staying one step ahead of the Syndicate. And that required information. Later that night, while Lily rested in the tiny sleeping quarters, Daniel decided to dig deeper into the Eclipse's database. The ship's computer was outdated and clunky, but it still held fragments of data collected over years of scavenging missions. Perhaps buried somewhere in those files was a clue about the Syndicator, the origins of the symbols. Etched into Lily's skin, hours passed as Daniel sifted through corrupted logs and encrypted files, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Just as fatigue began to set in, he stumbled upon something unusual, a classified entry marked Project Chimera. The file was heavily redacted, but enough remained legible to send a chill down his spine. According to the document, Project Chimera was an experimental program designed to unlock latent human potential. Scientists working under the auspices of the Syndicate had sought to harness abilities beyond normal comprehension, blending advanced technology with genetic manipulation. The goal was to create superhumans, individuals capable of wielding immense power for military and strategic purposes. But the most chilling part came near the end. Of the file, Subject 0, beneath that heading was a single name, Lily Harper. Daniel's heart sank as he read the details. Lily hadn't just been a random victim abducted by the Syndicate. She was the cornerstone of their entire operation. The experiments, the symbols, the crystal, all of it had been tailored specifically for her. According to the document, her DNA contained unique markers that made her uniquely suited to host the powers developed through Project Chimera. Without her, the project would fail. For a long time, Daniel simply sat there, staring at the screen. He didn't want to believe what he was reading, but the evidence was undeniable. The Syndicate wasn't chasing them because Lily was valuable. They were chasing her because she was essential. And if they caught her, they wouldn't stop until they reclaimed what they saw as theirs. When Lily emerged from the sleeping quarters the next morning, Daniel debated whether to tell her what he'd found. In the end, he decided she deserved to know. Sitting her down in the cockpit, he pulled up the file and explained everything. As she read, her expression shifted from shock to anger to resignation. "So I'm not just a person anymore," she said bitterly, closing the file. I'm a weapon. No, Daniel replied firmly. You're still you. They tried to make you into something else, but that doesn't define who you are. You're stronger than they ever imagined and smarter. That's why we're going. To fight back. But how? She asked, her voice trembling. Even if I learn to control these powers, the Syndicate will never stop coming for me. There's no winning this. There has to be a way, Daniel insisted. We just need to find someone who knows more about all this, someone who can help us. Lily frowned thoughtfully, her gaze drifting to the viewport. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, indifferent to the struggles of those aboard the Eclipse. Then, suddenly, an idea struck her. What about Marcus? She asked. He helped us before. Maybe he knows someone, a scientist or engineer, who could explain what's happening to me. Daniel hesitated, considering the suggestion. Trusting Marcus again was risky, especially after their narrow escape from the colony. But desperate times called for desperate measures. It's worth a shot, he conceded. Let's head back. To the colony. If anyone can point us in the right direction, it's him. With a new destination set, the Eclipse resumed its journey, weaving through hyperspace toward the remote settlement where Marcus lived. Along the way, Lily practiced, controlling her powers, determined to master them before confronting the Syndicate again. Each session brought incremental progress. She learned to form barriers more easily, channel energy without exhausting herself, and even manipulate objects with precision. Yet despite her growing confidence, she couldn't ignore the cost. Use of her abilities left her drained, both physically and mentally. When they arrived at the colony, the landscape seemed unchanged, barren and desolate, with dome structures dotting the horizon. But as they approached, something felt off. The usual bustle of activity was absent, replaced by an eerie stillness. No one greeted them at the landing pad, and the streets were eerily empty. This isn't right, Daniel muttered, his hand resting on the blaster at his side. Where is everyone? They found Marcus in his dome, pacing anxiously. When he saw them, relief washed over his face, but it was short-lived. You shouldn't have come back, he said urgently, ushering them inside. Things have gotten worse since you left. People are scared, and rumors are spreading. Some say you're spies. Others think you're dangerous. Either way, you're not welcome here anymore. What happened? Daniel asked, his voice tense. Marcus sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. After you left, strangers showed up, men in black uniforms. They started asking questions, making threats. Nobody knows who they are, but everyone's afraid of them. I managed to keep your secret, but I can't guarantee your safety if you stay. Lily exchanged a worried glance with Daniel. It's the Syndicate, she said quietly. They followed us. Looks like it, Marcus agreed grimly. If you're smart, you'll leave Nobi before they catch wind of your return. Daniel nodded reluctantly. We will, but first we need your help. Do you know anyone who might understand what's happening to Lily? Someone who could explain these symbols or the experiments done to her? Marcus hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty and self-preservation. Finally, he relented. There is one person, Anne, old friend of mine named Alina. She used to work as a researcher before dropping off the grid. She lives alone in the hills outside the colony. If anyone can help you, it's her. Thank you, Daniel said sincerely. We owe you one. Just promise me you'll be careful, Marcus replied. And don't come back this way again. That, they left the dome, heading toward the hills on foot. The journey was arduous, the terrain rocky and unforgiving, but they pressed on, driven by necessity. When they finally reached Elena's home, a modest shack nestled among jagged cliffs, they knocked cautiously on the door. A woman answered, her sharp eyes studying them intently. Who sent you? She demanded, her tone wary. Marcus, Daniel replied. We need your help. Alina hesitated, then stepped aside to let them in. Once inside, she listened intently as they explained their situation, her expression growing increasingly grave. When they finished, she nodded slowly. I've heard whispers about the Syndicate's experiments, she admitted. If what you're saying is true, Lily really is Subject Zero, then you're dealing with forces far beyond our understanding. But I might be able to help you decode the symbols. It won't be easy, though. How long will it take? Daniel asked. Days? Maybe weeks, Elena replied. And even then, I can't promise answers. But if you're willing to risk it, I'll do my best. Lily nodded resolutely. We don't have a choice. As they settled into Elena's home, preparing for the long process ahead, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Somewhere out there, the syndicate lurked, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when they did, Lily's newfound strength and the knowledge Elena might uncover would be their only hope of survival. The Eclipse shuddered as it approached the mysterious station, its engines straining against an invisible force that seemed determined to drag them closer. Daniel gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white with tension. The station loomed. Larger with each passing second, its surface pockmarked with age and decay. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its outer walls, pulsing in a rhythm that matched the ones etched into Lily's skin. She sat silently beside him, her green eyes fixed on the view screen, her expression unreadable. What is this place? Daniel muttered under his breath, more to himself than to anyone else. He glanced at Lily, hoping for some kind of insight, but she offered none. Instead, she stared ahead, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. I don't know, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I feel drawn to it, like it's calling me. Daniel frowned, his unease growing. We don't have much choice. Whatever's pulling us in isn't letting go. With a reluctant sigh, he guided the ship toward one of the station's docking bays. The battered hull of the Eclipse scraping lightly against the edges of the entrance as they entered. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence, broken only by the faint hum of ancient machinery. Once the ship was secured, Daniel turned to Lily. Stay here. I'll go check it out first. No, she replied firmly, shaking her head. Her tone left no room for argument. If this place has something to do with what happened to me, then I need to see it for myself. I'm not staying behind. He hesitated, torn between protecting her and respecting her determination. Finally, he nodded. Fine, but we stick together. No splitting up, Lily agreed, and together they stepped off the ship, their boots echoing softly against the metal floor. The interior of the station was dimly lit, the glow from the symbols providing just enough light to navigate. As they moved deeper inside, the air grew colder, carrying with it a faint metallic temps. The walls were covered in carvings images of strange creatures and intricate patterns that seemed to tell a story. Neither of them could decipher the meaning, but the designs felt familiar somehow, as though they'd seen pieces of them before. This feels wrong, Daniel whispered, his hand resting on the blaster holstered at his side. Like we're walking into someone else's tomb. It does, Lily admitted, her voice shaky, but it also feels important, like we're supposed to be here. Their footsteps slowed as they reached a large chamber at the heart of the station. In the center stood a massive structure, a towering monolith, covered in the same glowing symbols that adorned the walls. As they approached, the markings on Lily's arms flared brightly, causing her to gasp and stagger backward. I'm Elcott, her arms steadying her as she fought to stay upright. What's happening? He asked, his voice tinged with panic. I don't know, she cried, clutching her arms as if trying to contain the energy coursing through her. It's like it's alive, and it knows I'm here. Suddenly the monolith began to shift, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Low hum filled the chamber, growing louder until it vibrated through their bones. Then, without warning, a beam of light shot upward, illuminating the ceiling and revealing a series of holographic images projected into the air. The images depicted scenes, unlike anything Daniel or Lily had ever seen. There were glimpses of an advanced civilization, towering cities, sleek spacecraft, and beings with elongated limbs and luminous eyes. They appeared peaceful, living in harmony with their surroundings. But as the sequence progressed, the tone shifted. The skies darkened, the cities crumbled, and the beings vanished, replaced by chaos and destruction. What is this? Daniel murmured, his voice filled with awe. It's their history, Lily said, her eyes wide with realization. We're powerful. Too powerful. Something went wrong, and they destroyed themselves. As the holograms faded, the monolith emitted a soft chime, drawing their attention back to it. The symbols on its surface rearranged themselves, forming new patterns that pulsed rhythmically. One section of the structure slid open, revealing a small compartment containing a crystalline object. It shimmered with an inner light, casting prismatic colors across the room. Wait. Daniel asked. Nodding toward the crystal, Lily didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer, her movements cautious yet deliberate. When she reached out to touch the crystal, a surge of energy coursed through her body, causing her to cry out. The glow from the symbols intensified, spreading outward until it enveloped both her and the monolith. Daniel shielded his eyes, unable to look directly at the brilliance. When the light finally subsided, Lily stood motionless, her breathing shallow but steady. The crystal was gone, absorbed into her palm, and the markings on her arms had grown. Brighter, more defined? She looked down at herself, confusion and wonder mingling in her expression. What did it do to you? Daniel asked, stepping toward her. I think it showed me something, she replied slowly. A memory not mine, but theirs. These people, they created the symbols. They used them to control their power, to keep it from consuming them. But when they lost control, her voice trailed off, heavy with implication. Before either of them could process what had happened, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and the ground beneath their feet trembled violently. The docking bay doors began closing, sealing them inside. They know we're here, Daniel said grimly, grabbing Lily's hand. We need to get back to the ship. They ran through the corridors, retracing their steps as quickly as possible. Behind them, the sound of footsteps echoed too many to count. The syndicate had arrived, their black uniforms stark against the dim lighting of the station. Armed guards poured into the chamber, surrounding the monolith and scanning the area for intrusions. We can't let them catch us, Lily panted, her legs burning with effort. Not after what I just saw. Daniel nodded, pushing himself harder, despite the fatigue creeping into his muscles. They reached the docking bay just as the last sliver of the exit sealed shut. Trapped, they ducked behind a pile of debris, watching as the guards spread out, searching methodically. There's no way out, Daniel whispered, his mind racing for a solution. Then he noticed something, a maintenance hatch leading to the station's ventilation system. It was narrow and likely dangerous, but it might offer them a chance to escape unnoticed. This way, he said, gesturing for Lily to follow. Together, they crawled through the hatch, squeezing through tight spaces as the sounds of pursuit faded behind them. The vents twisted and turned, forcing them to rely on instinct rather than direction. At one point, Lily paused, pressing her hand against the wall. The symbols on her skin glowed faintly, guiding them forward. How are you doing that? Daniel asked, amazed. I don't know, she admitted. I just feel it, like the station is helping me. Eventually, they emerged near the edge of the station, close enough to see the stars beyond. Below them lay a drop too far to survive without assistance, but Lily had other ideas. Closing her eyes, she focused on the energy within her, channeling it into a protective barrier around them. With a deep breath, she leaped, dragging Daniel along with her. For a moment, they hung suspended in midair, the barrier slowing their descent. Then, with a burst of energy, Lily redirected their trajectory, propelling them toward the eclipse. They landed hard on the ship's hull, bruised but alive. Without wasting a second, Daniel scrambled to the cockpit, firing up the engines as Lily climbed aboard. "Hold on," shouted, yanking the controls. The eclipse roared to life, hurtling away from the station, just as the Syndicate's forces breached the docking bay. Laser fire streaked past them, narrowly missing their engines. But Daniel's piloting skills kept them ahead of the chase as they escaped into hyperspace. Lily collapsed into a seat, exhausted but triumphant. "What did they want with that?" "Crystal," she asked, her voice weak but curious. "I don't know," Daniel replied honestly, "but I think it's connected to your powers and maybe even to why they've been chasing us all this time." She nodded, staring at her hands. The symbols still glowed faintly, a reminder of the bond she now shared with the mysterious station. Whatever secrets lay hidden within those markings, one thing was certain: their journey was far from over. And somewhere out there, the Syndicate waited, determined to reclaim what they believed was theirs. The colony was eerily quiet as Daniel, Lily, and Marcus made their way to one of the domed structures. Inside, the air was cool and dry, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat outside. The dome's interior was sparsely furnished: a few chairs, a table, and a small kitchenette tucked into the corner, but it offered a sense of shelter that the eclipse could no longer provide. For the first time in days, Lily allowed herself to relax, if only slightly. Marcus moved about the room with an easy confidence, offering them water and whatever meager supplies he had on hand. Despite his gruff exterior, there was kindness in his demeanor, a warmth that put Lily at ease. She sat quietly on one of the chairs, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. While Daniel explained their situation in vague terms, he didn't mention the Syndicate or Lily's powers, choosing instead to frame their predicament as a simple case of being pursued by dangerous individuals. "You always did have a knack for attracting trouble," Marcus said with a chuckle, leaning back against the counter. His tone was light, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. "Still, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. Just keep your heads down, and nobody will bother you." "Thanks, Marcus," Daniel replied, his voice tinged with gratitude. "We won't be any trouble." Lily nodded in agreement, though she remained silent. Her instincts told her to trust Marcus. He seemed genuine enough, but years of captivity had taught her to be cautious. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into another trap, even if she couldn't pinpoint why. As the hours passed, the three of them settled into a tentative rhythm. Marcus left briefly to gather food and other essentials, returning with armfuls of supplies that barely filled the pantry. Daniel busied himself with minor repairs to the ship, ensuring it would be ready to leave at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, Lily stayed inside the dome, practicing her abilities in secret. She found a secluded corner where she could focus without drawing attention, testing the limits of her control while avoiding detection, despite her efforts to remain discreet. Lily's powers continued to grow stronger and more unpredictable. One evening, as she concentrated on forming a protective barrier around herself, the energy surged unexpectedly, causing the lights in the dome to flicker violently. Startled, she quickly reined in the power, but not before Daniel noticed the disturbance. "What happened?" he asked, stepping into the room with a concerned expression. "Nothing," Lily replied quickly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I just lost focus for a second." Daniel knelt beside her, his voice gentle yet firm. "You can't afford to lose control like that, Lily. Not here, if anyone sees." "I know," she interrupted, her tone sharper than she intended. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. "I'm sorry. I'm trying my best, but it's getting harder to hold it all in." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out, together, but we need to be careful." Though his words were meant to comfort her, they also served as a reminder of the stakes. Every slip-up brought them closer to discovery and potential disaster. The Syndicate wasn't the only threat lurking in the shadows. Whoever lived in this colony might pose dangers of their own if they suspected anything unusual. Unbeknownst to them, their presence had already raised suspicions. Outside the dome, whispers spread among the colonists, their curiosity piqued by the sudden arrival of strangers. A group of men gathered near the edge of the settlement, their faces obscured by hoods as they discussed the newcomers in hushed tones. They came out of nowhere. One of them muttered, gesturing toward the landing pad where the Eclipse rested, and they're hiding something. Maybe they're smugglers, another suggested, his voice laced with skepticism. Or worse. No matter what they are, they don't belong here, a third man interjected. If they're running from someone, it's not our problem. We should report them before they bring trouble down on us. The leader of the group nodded grimly. Agreed. Let's send word to the nearest patrol. I'll know what to do. Back inside the dome, Daniel and Lily remained oblivious to the growing unrest. That night, as they prepared to rest, Marcus returned from his rounds. His expression unusually somber. He hesitated for a moment before speaking, his voice low and urgent. There's something you need to know, he began, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to overhear. Word's gotten out about you too. People are talking and not in a good way. Daniel frowned, his stomach tightening with unease. What kind of talk? Marcus sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. They think you're fugitives. Some of them want to turn you in. I've done what? I can to keep them quiet, but it's only a matter of time before someone contacts the authorities or worse. Lily's heart sank as she processed his words.
So we're not safe here after all?
Not for long, Marcus admitted. But I can help you get out. There's an old supply route. Nearby it's risky, but it might buy you some time. Nodded, already formulating a plan. We'll leave tonight. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. Don't thank me yet, Marcus replied with a wry smile. Just promise me you'll stay alive. With that, he slipped out of the dome, leaving Daniel and Lily to prepare for their departure. They packed quickly, gathering only the essentials before heading back to the Eclipse. As they boarded the ship, Lily paused for a moment, gazing out at the darkened landscape beyond the viewport. Do you think we'll ever find a place where we truly belong? She asked softly, her voice tinged with sadness. Daniel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. I don't know. But I do know this we're stronger together. Wherever we go, we'll face it side by side. Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes still reflected uncertainty. Side by side, then, the engines roared to life as the Eclipse lifted off the ground, its battered frame trembling under the strain. Below them, the colony faded into darkness, swallowed by the vast expanse of desert. For now, they were free, but freedom came with a price. The syndicate was still out there, watching and waiting. Now, somewhere deep within Lily, the glowing symbols beneath her skin pulsed faintly, a constant reminder of the power and peril that lay ahead. As the ship entered hyperspace, Daniel set a course for the coordinates provided in the mysterious message. Though every instinct screamed at him to avoid the location, he knew they couldn't run forever. Sooner or later, they would have to confront the syndicate and uncover the truth behind Lily's transformation. For hours, they traveled in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Then, without warning, the ship's systems began malfunctioning once again. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the consoles sparked erratically. This time, however, the disturbance originated not from Lily's powers, but from an external source. Signal jamming their navigation and cutting off communication were being pulled off course, Daniel announced, gripping the controls tightly. On the view screen, a massive structure loomed ahead, a derelict space station drifting silently in the void. Its design was unfamiliar, its surface covered in strange markings that glowed faintly in the darkness. What is that place? Lily whispered, her voice filled with awe and dread. I don't know, Daniel replied, his jaw clenched. But I think we're about to find out. Against his better judgment, he guided the Eclipse toward the station, its gravitational pull, too strong to resist. As they drew closer, the symbols etched into Lily's skin began to glow brighter, resonating with the markings on the station's hull. Whatever awaited them inside, it was clear that fate had other plans, and there was no turning back now. After the intense encounter with the syndicate, life aboard the Eclipse settled into an uneasy calm. Lily Harper spent most of her time recovering from the toll her abilities had taken on her body. while Daniel Carter worked tirelessly to repair the damage inflicted during their narrow escape. Though the immediate threat had passed, both of them knew it was only a matter of time before the syndicate returned. For now, however, they focused on survival, patching up wounds, conserving resources, and preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. Lily's recovery was slow but steady. She spent hours each day sitting quietly in the ship's tiny common area, staring out at the endless expanse of stars beyond the viewport. Her green eyes often seemed distant, as though she were searching for answers written in the constellations. Daniel noticed that she rarely spoke, and less spoken to, preferring instead to keep her thoughts to herself. But when she did open up, words carried weight fragments of memories that painted a chilling picture of her captivity. "They didn't just experiment on me," she said one evening, breaking the silence as they shared a meal of rehydrated rations. "They changed me. I don't know how or why, but something inside me is different now." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, chewing slowly. Had seen enough to believe her claims, especially after witnessing the destructive power she unleashed against the Syndicate's fleet. Still, he couldn't help but feel uneasy about the implications. "Do you remember anything specific? Any details about what they did?" She hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her plate absent-mindedly. "They talked about unlocking potential," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "At first, I thought it was nonsense, a way to justify their cruelty. But then things started happening. Strange things. Like the tingling in my hands, the flashes of light. It was like my body was trying to fight back, even though I didn't understand why." Her gaze dropped to her arms, where the glowing symbols still lingered faintly beneath her skin. They no longer pulsed with energy as they had during the attack, but their presence remained a constant reminder of the experiments she'd endured. "I think these are part of it," she continued, gesturing to the markings. "Sometimes I can feel them moving, shifting under my skin. It's like they're alive." Daniel frowned, his mind racing with questions. The symbols were unlike anything he'd ever encountered, their intricate designs hinting at a level of technology far beyond human capability. If the Syndicate had truly created them, more worse, if they had discovered them somewhere else, it meant they were dealing with forces far more dangerous than either of them realized. "I wish I could tell you more," Lily admitted, her tone heavy with frustration. "But everything feels so fragmented, pieces of a puzzle I can't put together." "You've been through a lot," Daniel replied gently. "It's okay if you don't have all the answers right now. We'll figure it out together." Hello. His words were meant to reassure her. They also served as a reminder of the bond forming between them. In the short time since rescuing her, Daniel had come to see Lily not just as a victim of circumstance, but as someone strong enough to endure unimaginable horrors and brave enough to fight back. That courage inspired him, even as it filled him with a growing sense of responsibility. Whatever dangers awaited them, he vowed to protect her no matter the cost. As the days turned into weeks, Lily began testing the limits of her newfound abilities. At first, it was small things, lighting a dim bulb with a flick of her fingers, creating a shimmering barrier to deflect objects tossed her way. Each success brought a mix of awe and fear, as neither of them fully understood the extent of her powers. One afternoon, while Daniel tinkered with the ship's engine, Lily sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, concentrating intently on a metal wrench floating inches above her palm. "Careful," Daniel warned, glancing over his shoulder. "Last time you tried that, you nearly burned a hole in the wall." "I'm fine," she assured him, though beads of sweat formed on her forehead. With a deep breath, she guided the wrench toward him, depositing it gently onto the workbench. Beside him, see? No explosions this time. He chuckled softly, impressed despite himself. "Not bad. Maybe you'll be fixing the ship next." Her smile faded quickly, replaced by a look of concern. "It's not just about tricks, Daniel. Every time I use this power, it takes something out of me. It's like I'm borrowing energy from somewhere, and eventually I'll have to pay it back." The gravity of her statement hung in the air between them. Daniel set down his tools, turning to face her fully. "What do you mean, pay it back how?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I can feel it, the drain. It's getting harder to control. What if I lose myself completely?" What if I hurt someone or worse? Her fears mirrored his own, though he hadn't voiced them until now. The potential danger posed by her abilities was undeniable, yet abandoning her was never an option. Instead, Daniel resolved to help her. Find balance to harness her gifts without letting them consume her. We'll take it slow, he promised. One step at a time. If things get too risky, we'll figure something out. You're not alone in this, Lily. Her gratitude was evident in the brief smile she offered before returning to her practice. Over the following days, they developed a routine, Daniel handling repairs and navigation while Lily explored her powers under careful supervision. Slowly but surely, she grew more confident, learning to channel her energy with greater precision. Yet even as her control improved, the looming threat of the Syndicate cast a shadow over their progress. One night, as the eclipse drifted through hyperspace, Daniel received a message that sent chills down his spine. It came through on an encrypted channel, its origin untraceable. The transmission was brief, consisting of only a few lines of text. Leave the girl. She is not yours to save. Deliver her to us, or face the consequences. The words were accompanied by coordinates leading to a remote sector of space. Daniel stared at the screen, his jaw clenched tightly. Whoever had sent the message knew exactly where they were. They weren't bluffing. When Lily joined him in the cockpit the next morning, he debated whether to show her the message. Ultimately, he decided against it, unwilling to add to her burden. Instead, he steered the conversation toward their next destination. There's a colony planet not far from here, he explained, pulling up a map on the view screen. It's small and isolated, but it might be our best bet for laying low for a while. We can restock supplies and regroup. Lily nodded, though her expression betrayed a hint of unease. Do you think it's safe? It's as good a place? As any, he replied, forcing a reassuring smile. Besides, I have a friend there, an old ally, who owes me a favor. His name's Marcus. He'll keep us out of trouble. Though Lily accepted his explanation, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into another trap. The Syndicate's warning echoed in his mind, a grim reminder that their enemies were always one step ahead. Still, he refused to let fear dictate their actions. If they wanted to stay alive, they needed allies, and Marcus was their best chance. The journey to the colony took several days, during which tension simmered just beneath the surface. Lily practiced her abilities in secret, determined to master them before they reached their destination. Meanwhile, Daniel monitored the ship's sensors closely, watching for any signs of pursuit. So far, the path ahead appeared clear, but experience had taught him never to trust appearances. When they finally arrived at the colony, the sight that greeted them was less than welcoming. The settlement consisted of a cluster of domed structures surrounded by barren terrain, its inhabitants going about their business with weary expressions. As the eclipse descended toward the landing pad, Daniel spotted Marcus waiting for them. Tall, wiry man with graying hair and a weathered face. Despite his rugged appearance, there was warmth in his eyes as he waved them down. Been a long time, Carter, Marcus said with a grin as Daniel stepped off the ship. I didn't expect to see you around these parts again. Things change, Daniel replied, shaking his hand firmly. Thanks for meeting us on such short notice. No problem. You know I always repay my debts. Marcus glanced past him, his smile faltering slightly as his gaze landed on Lily. Who's this? This is Lily, Daniel introduced, stepping aside to allow her to approach. She's a friend. We're in a bit of trouble and we need a safe place to stay for a while. Marcus studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a nod, he gestured toward the nearest dome. Come on then, let's get you settled. As they followed him inside, Daniel couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that something wasn't right. The colony seemed quiet, and the other residents avoided eye contact as they passed. Still, he pushed his doubts aside, focusing on the task at hand. For now, they were safe. Or so he hoped. Little did he know, their arrival had already been noted and reported. Somewhere in the shadows, eyes watched and waited, biding their time until the perfect moment to strike. The Eclipse hummed softly as it drifted through the endless expanse of space, its battered frame groaning faintly with every movement. Inside, Daniel Carter worked tirelessly to ensure the ship remained operational while keeping a close eye on his unexpected passenger. Lily Harper had been unconscious for most of the journey so far, her frail body stretched out on a makeshift cot in the cramped medical bay. Though she was safe now, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling the danger still lingered, not just for her, but for both of them. When Lily finally stirred, it was late into the ship's artificial night cycle. The dim glow of emergency lights bathed the room in a soft orange hue, casting long shadows across the walls. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing those piercing green eyes once more. For a moment she simply stared at the ceiling, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward Daniel, who sat nearby, watching her intently. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. "You're on my ship," Daniel replied, leaning forward slightly. "It's called the Eclipse. You're safe here." Lily blinked, processing his words. She tried to sit up, but her body betrayed her, collapsing back onto the cot with a weak groan. "Ah!" Daniel reached out instinctively, placing a hand on her shoulder to steady her. She flinched at his touch, pulling away sharply. The reaction didn't surprise him. After what she'd been through, trust would be hard to earn. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "I promise." She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of deception. Whatever she saw must have reassured her, because she relaxed slightly, though her guard remained firmly in place. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name's Daniel Carter. Well, I guess you could call me a scavenger. I found you on that station. Do you remember anything about how you got there?" Lily hesitated, her brow furrowing, as if trying to piece together fragments of a shattered memory. "Not much," she admitted. "I remember being taken, dragged somewhere against my will. There were people in uniforms, scientists maybe. They kept asking me questions, running tests. But everything after that is blurry." She paused, shuddering visibly. "They did things to me, Daniel. Things I can't explain." Daniel frowned, his stomach tightening at the thought of what she might have endured. Wanted to ask more, to press her for details, but something in her tone told him she wasn't ready to talk about it yet. Instead, he offered her a small smile. "You don't have to tell me anything right now. Just focus on getting better. We'll figure the rest out later." Lily nodded, though her eyes betrayed a deep unease. Despite her gratitude for being rescued, she seemed burdened by secrets too heavy for her to bear alone.
Oh.
Daniel resolved to give her time, knowing that healing both physically and mentally would take longer than a few days. Over the next several hours, Daniel tended to her injuries as best he could. He cleaned and bandaged the raw marks on her wrists where the chains had cut into her skin, applied ointment to the fresher cuts and bruises littering her arms and legs, and monitored her vitals using the ship's rudimentary medical equipment. Though the Eclipse lacked the advanced tools needed for proper care, Lily appeared to recover faster than expected. By the following day, she was able to sit upright without assistance, though her movements remained slow and deliberate. During this time, Daniel noticed something peculiar about her. Whenever she moved, especially when she raised her hands or flexed her fingers, faint patterns began to appear beneath her skin. At first, he thought it might be a trick of the light, a reflection from the overhead panels, or an illusion caused by fatigue. But as he observed her more closely, he realized the markings were real. They glowed softly, shifting and pulsing like living veins of energy coursing through her flesh. "What are these?" he asked one evening, pointing to the symbols etched into her forearm. They shimmered faintly under the cabin lights, their intricate designs unlike anything he'd ever seen. Lily glanced down at her arm, her expression darkening. "I don't know," she admitted. "They weren't there before. At least I don't think they were. Be they're part of whatever those people did to me." Daniel frowned, his mind racing with possibilities. The symbols didn't look like scars or tattoos. They seemed alive, almost organic. And if they were connected to the experiments she mentioned, then whoever had imprisoned her was playing with forces far beyond human understanding. The realization sent a chill down his spine as the days passed. Lily grew stronger, though her demeanor remained guarded. She rarely spoke unless prompted, and even then, her answers were brief and cautious. Still, Daniel sensed that she was beginning to trust him more, at least tolerate his presence. One night, as they shared a meal in the tiny galley, she opened up a little more. "They called themselves the Syndicate," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Daniel looked up from his plate, surprised by the sudden admission. "The Syndicate?" He echoed. She nodded. "That's what they said their group was called. They wore black uniforms, with insignias shaped like triangles. They never explained why they chose me, only that I was special somehow. They ran test after test, injecting me with strange substances, hooking me up to machines." Her voice trailed off, trembling with emotion. "Sometimes I thought I heard them talking about unlocking potential or harnessing power. I didn't understand it then, and I still don't." Daniel listened intently, piecing together what little information she provided. If the Syndicate truly existed, and based on what he'd seen, there was no reason to doubt it. They were clearly involved in something dangerous. Experimenting on humans suggested a level of ambition that bordered on madness. And if Lily was indeed their success story, as she seemed to imply, then freeing her may have put a target on both their backs. Before he could respond, ship systems began acting strangely. Lights flickered erratically, and the hum of the engines grew louder, almost deafening. Alarms blared throughout the cabin, warning of critical malfunctions. Daniel jumped to his feet, rushing to the cockpit to assess the situation. Behind him, Lily followed unsteadily, clutching the wall for support. "What's happening?" she demanded, her voice tinged with panic. "I don't know," Daniel shouted over the noise. He scanned the console frantically, searching for the source of the problem. Everything appeared normal at first glance, but then he noticed something alarming. The ship's energy levels were spiking uncontrollably, far beyond what the reactors could handle. And then he saw the symbols on Lily's skin were glowing, brighter than ever, pulsating in sync with the fluctuations in the ship's systems. Without thinking, he grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Lily, does this have anything to do with you?" Her eyes widened in shock. "No. I don't think so." But the evidence was undeniable. As the glowing intensified, the ship shuddered violently, throwing them both off balance. Sparks flew from the control panel, and smoke began filling the air. Desperate to regain control, Daniel initiated an emergency shutdown sequence, cutting power to non-essential systems. Slowly, the chaos subsided, leaving the cabin eerily quiet. Breathing heavily, Daniel turned to Lily, who looked as shaken as he felt. "What just happened?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. Tears welled up in her eyes as she shook her head. "I don't know," she whispered, "but whatever it is, it scares me." For the first time since rescuing her, Daniel allowed himself to fully grasp the magnitude of what he'd gotten himself into. This wasn't just about saving a woman from captivity. It was about unraveling a mystery that could change everything. He thought he knew about the universe. Judging by the fear in Lily's eyes, she understood that better than anyone. The incident left them both on edge, but it also marked a turning point in their relationship. Over the next few days, Lily became more forthcoming, sharing snippets of her past and speculating about the nature of the experiments she'd endured. She revealed that she had started experiencing strange sensations shortly after her captured tingling in her fingertips, flashes of light behind her eyelids, and occasional bursts of energy that left her drained. These episodes had grown more frequent and intense over time, culminating in the catastrophic event aboard the Eclipse. Daniel listened patiently, doing his best to offer comfort and reassurance. He wasn't sure what to make of her abilities, or whether they posed a threat, but he refused to abandon her. Something about her resilience struck a chord within him, reminding him of his own struggles to survive in a harsh and unforgiving galaxy. One evening, as they discussed possible destinations for their next stop, the ship's sensors picked up another anomaly. A fleet of sleek black vessels had entered their vicinity, moving silently and deliberately. Their triangular insignias matched the description Lily had given earlier. The Syndicate had found them. "We need to move," Daniel said urgently, jumping to his feet. Now Lily's face paled, but she nodded resolutely.
Do what you
Have to do, she said. I won't let them take me again. With adrenaline pumping through his veins, Daniel plotted a hasty course away from the pursuing ships. The Eclipse roared to life, its engines straining under the sudden acceleration. For a brief moment, it seemed they might escape undetected. But the Syndicate was relentless, closing the gap with alarming speed. In a quiet corner of the galaxy, far from the bustling trade routes and shining cities of advanced civilizations, there floated an old starship named the Eclipse. Its paint was chipped, its engines groaned under the strain of every jump-through. Hyperspace, and its captain was a man who had seen better days. Daniel Carter wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to find at the center of a grand adventure. He was ordinary in almost every wave-verge height, brown hair that was starting, too thin, and eyes that carried the weight of years spent wandering among the stars. But despite his unremarkable appearance, Daniel had a knack for finding trouble, or perhaps trouble had a knack for finding him. It all started on what seemed like just another routine mission. Daniel was scavenging for spare parts in a sector of space known as the Drift, a vast expanse littered with debris from forgotten battles and abandoned stations. The Drift was dangerous, yes, but it was also rich with opportunities for someone willing to take risks. And Daniel needed those opportunities more than ever. The Eclipse was falling apart, and without some serious repairs it wouldn't be. Long before he found himself stranded somewhere in deep space, as he guided the Eclipse through the wreckage, something unusual caught his attention, a faint signal blinking across his console. At first, he thought it might be interference, a trick of the static that often filled this part of the galaxy. But as he adjusted the frequency, the signal became clearer. It was a distress call, weak but unmistakable. Curiosity got the better of him. Most captains would have ignored such a thing. After all, responding to random signals in the Drift was a good way to end up dead. But Daniel had always been drawn to mysteries, no matter how small or insignificant they seemed. So, against his better judgment, he set a course toward the source of the transmission. The signal led him to a derelict space station, drifting silently in the void. From the outside, it looked like any other piece of junk floating in the Drift trustee. Metal panels, shattered windows, and ominous scorch marks covering its surface. But as Daniel brought the Eclipse closer, he noticed something strange. The station's power core was still active, emitting a faint hum that vibrated through the hull of his ship. Whoever or whatever had sent the distress call was likely still inside, armed with little more than a flashlight and a blaster he hadn't fired in years. Daniel stepped onto the station. The airlock creaked open with a groan, releasing a cloud of stale air that smelled faintly of oil and decay. Inside, the corridors were dark and eerily silent, save for the occasional drip of water echoing off the walls. Every step Daniel took felt heavier than the last, as if the station itself didn't want him there. Still, he pressed on, following the faint trail of the signal deeper into the labyrinthine structure, after what felt like hours of searching. Daniel finally found the source of the distress call. At the end of a narrow hallway, partially hidden behind a pile of fallen debris, was a heavy metal door. Unlike the rest of the station, which seemed on the verge of collapse, this door was intact. Its surface polished smooth and free of rust. A keypad glowed softly beside it, suggesting that someone had been here recently. Daniel hesitated for a moment, unsure whether opening the door was a good idea. But curiosity won out again. He entered the code displayed on his scanner. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a scene that made Daniel's blood run cold. Inside the room was a young woman chained to the wall, her wrists bound by thick metal cuffs that dug into her skin. She was barely conscious, her head slumped forward and her body trembling slightly. Her clothes were tattered, and her pale skin bore countless scars, some fresh and others faded with time. Despite her condition, there was something about her that struck Daniel as extraordinary. Even in her weakened state, she radiated a quiet strength. As though she had endured unimaginable horrors and somehow survived, Daniel approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hey," he said softly, keeping his voice low so as not to startle her. "Are you okay?" The woman stirred at the sound of his voice, lifting her head just enough to meet his gaze. Her eyes were a startling shade of green, sharp and intelligent despite the haze of exhaustion clouding them. For a moment, she simply stared at him, as if trying to decide whether he was friend or foe. Then with great effort, she whispered, "Help me." Without hesitation, Daniel began working on the chains. They were reinforced with some kind of advanced alloy, resistant to cutting tools and brute force alike. But Daniel had spent enough time tinkering with old ships to know a thing or two about locks. And after several tense minutes, he managed to disable the mechanism holding the cuffs in place. The chains fell away with a clatter, and the woman collapsed into his arms. He carried her out of the room as quickly as he could, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? Why had she been imprisoned here? Most importantly, who or what had done this to her? Before he could dwell on these thoughts too long, alarms blared throughout the station, red lights flashing along the corridors. The noise startled the woman, causing her to grip Daniel's arm tightly. "We need to leave," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Daniel didn't argue. He sprinted back the way he came, dodging falling debris as the station began to shake violently. Whatever security systems were still operational had clearly detected his intrusion, and they weren't happy about it. Airlock, the entire structure was groaning under the strain of impending collapse. With one final burst of speed, Daniel leaped onto the Eclipse, dragging the woman inside just as the outer hatch sealed shut behind them. No sooner had they escaped, the station then had exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending shock waves rippling through the surrounding debris field. Daniel watched the spectacle from the safety of the cockpit, his hands gripping the controls tightly. Beside him, the woman lay sprawled across the co-pilot's seat, her breathing shallow but steady. She was safe for now, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were only beginning. As the Eclipse drifted further away from the wreckage, Daniel turned his attention back to the mysterious woman. She was younger than he'd initially thought, probably in her mid-20s. With delicate features framed by shoulder-length blonde hair streaked with dirt and grime. Despite her frail appearance, there was something resilient about her, a stubborn determination that refused to give in, even when everything else had been stripped away. Daniel knew instinctively that she was no ordinary prisoner. There was a story here, one that went far beyond the confines of that crumbling station. "What's your name?" he asked gently, breaking the silence. She hesitated for a moment as if unsure whether to trust him. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she replied, "Lily. My name is Lily Harper." Daniel nodded, filing the information away for later. For now, his priority was getting her to safety. The Eclipse wasn't much, but it was home-manned for the first time in what felt like forever. It had someone else aboard besides him. As he plotted a course away from the drift, Daniel couldn't help but wonder what fate had brought Lily into his life. Little did he know, freeing her from those chains would set them both on a path neither of them could have anticipated, a journey filled with danger, discovery, and secrets that would change the galaxy forever.